Okay, sorry. My pen says world champion grudge holder,
Accurate.
right? That's what I said. Hi, welcome back to Chronically Authentic, the podcast.
All right.
We took a 2 week break. Um, we got a lot going on, and I'd love to tell you all about it, but I'd rather spend the time that we have together giving you things that you can actually take into your life, and us complaining is not something I want to give to you.
Nobody wants to hear all that.
No. In a nutshell, though, Matt and I are at the very beginning stages of PCSing. Is that how you conjugate that acronym?
I just say moving because who wants to hear acronyms? But yeah, that's what the military calls it.
We're moving. We're at the beginning stages of a military move. And
Mhm.
if you don't know, or whatever, this is my first experience of a military move since marrying Matt. And when I tell you I'm a little stressed, that's the understatement of probably the century.
It's been a joy.
An almond joy?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, exactly.
um, so I wanted to talk about something I heard in my personal development the other day, actually, because it just really, really struck me in my core, and I feel like it's something maybe a lot of us struggle with. So let's
Mhm.
let's talk about it. Do you ever struggle or have this inner dialogue that people don't hear you or you're just not being heard? Do you deal with that?
I used to deal with it, or it used to bother me a lot more back in the day, I would say. I don't really feel that way anymore, but it definitely used to bother me when I was growing up. How about you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you still feel that way?
Um no, sometimes. I really don't care if people hear me or understand me. Of course I want them to, but at the end of the day, like I can't control what people think in their brains. And that was something that like I thought was a huge takeaway from
Hmm.
that for me and that personal development was the stories and the scenarios and the noise of other people's lives that they have in their own minds. Like you are not the forefront of
Yeah.
that voice or that story or what have you.
Yeah.
And that's so true. We always feel like, oh, this person's thinking that or
They hate me.
they hate me. Dude, they're not thinking about you. Like that's just your ego. And like
Hmm.
that is something that I still struggle with is
Hmm.
like my ego convincing me that people are thinking things
Yeah.
or saying things or like I'm the subject of conversation in rooms that I'm not present in. That's insecurity. That's your ego.
That's not to say you may not be a passive thought in someone's mind or you may not come up in a conversation, but you're not, their world isn't revolving around you like we think it is.
Yeah, you're not the main character in their story. You're the main character in your story.
And that's all you can control.
Precisely that.
Hmm.
So one of the things that like that I really took away from that was you're not the main character in other people's story. And that's okay. You're not supposed to be. Except for you, Matthew.
Hmm.
I better be the main character in your story.
Yeah, my world does revolve around yours, so we're good there.
I was just kidding, but I love that. That makes me feel very special.
Like you didn't already know that.
I thought your world revolved around the Ravens, but I digress.
It's off season.
So maybe that's something that you personally struggle with. We actually listened to this in the car after a very stressful day yesterday. I'd like to go through some of the notes of what was discussed and then like we can talk about those things.
Yeah.
Have you ever struggled to be heard? Yes, I have. And I feel like I've been struggling to be heard like before now because like I said I really don't care. I'm going to keep chucking on no matter what. But
Hmm.
growing up, I come from a big family. Like there when everyone was together there was 14 or 15 people.
Hmm.
That's pretty big. And my family's Italian Sicilian. So everyone's loud. They're yelling across the room. They're yelling at each other. There was not one family function where there wasn't a war happening. Not even kidding.
Competing personalities.
Competing personalities, legitimate arguments.
Hmm.
One year, and this is kind of like a famous story, my grandma got so mad at my great grandmother that she punched a hole, like she punched a pumpkin pie. And so that Thanksgiving, they literally served pumpkin pie with my grandmother's fist imprinted into the center of it.
Why the pie? What did the pie do?
Well, I think the pie didn't do anything, but like she and my great grandmother were arguing, and probably because Nanny was in my grandmother's way in the kitchen, and that always made her
Hmm.
completely irate. I don't know that that's what it was, but if I had to guess, it was probably something along the lines of that. But anyway, my grandma got so mad that she like slammed her fist down, and the pumpkin pie just so happened to be there.
Dude, the ultimate troll move if your grandma was still alive is to go over there for Thanksgiving and serve a pie with a fist in it. That'd be
I
so
know.
funny.
Damn, why did she have to die?
God,
Can we bring her back just so we can like
that's great. I love
that's
that.
actually speaking of my grandma, I say this to Matt like randomly and quite often. Like I cannot stand that he didn't get to meet her. Like you would have really liked her. She was just a hoot.
Never say never.
Just say never. Anyway, so yeah, I always felt in my family that I didn't have a voice. That even when I tried to exert myself and speak up, there were people way louder than me. And anytime I had something to say, it was like, oh, well, you're just a kid, shut up.
Hmm.
So growing up, like I had a really hard time expressing myself
Hmm.
in any situation. I didn't like to exert myself. I always felt like I didn't feel noticed and like nobody called on me for stuff. And I can definitely relate to that. What about you?
Mine wasn't so much that I didn't think I was being heard. Mine really came from a place of like shyness inside of me where I didn't think anyone cared enough to hear what I had to say. And so for the most part, I stayed to myself. And like I always say on here, I we moved around a lot when I was a kid. I probably went to like a dozen different schools, and it was just hard for me to fit in general. So I usually tried to stay to myself. And when I did make friends, I was just like the quiet one in the group. And it took me a long time to come out of that shell, um, until I was like starting to get older and started getting into drinking and partying and stuff like that. Is when I came out of my shell, not in the best ways, but yeah, I had to work on that a lot when I quit drinking because I didn't know who I was and I didn't know how to use my voice because it had been suppressed so long or I didn't have a good outlet for it. So that's my past with it.
Thank you for sharing
Thanks for having me.
that. You're ridiculous. I can't. So, in my personal development, he went through these four things to help kind of overcome that why you feel like you're not being heard. And so the first thing that Brendan had said was, diagnose your filter of fear.
Mhm.
And so what he meant by that was like, if you're struggling to be heard, somewhere there's a filter in how you speak and how
Mhm.
you project yourself and how you show up in your friends group and so on and so forth, whether that's your tone or whatever. Like there's some form of a filter out of some fear that you have, whether it's judgment or insecurity.
Mhm.
um what did he say, that I need to filter what I say so that you please other people,
Mhm.
because you don't want to offend anybody. And we live in a world now where like everyone's offended about everything, and it's like, yo, okay, well, whatever, I'm still gonna say what I gotta say. And I can
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially like working in the social media realm, you almost feel like some things you can't talk about,
Yeah.
some things you feel like maybe I want to avoid that topic.
And it's the same things people say not to bring up at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Religion and politics.
He goes on to say that, like, when you say, I don't feel heard, if you're not being heard, you are actually not expressing your truth. You're thinking, I don't want to say this because I don't want to hurt them or hurt me or cause a conflict. and making things more generalized statements versus direct statements.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something personally, like, I have really learned how to communicate effectively by being direct. And I was saying this to Matt yesterday while we were like, when we finished listening, this kind of like reflecting on the conversation was that I am so direct and clear with communication. It's never received as being clear and
Mm-hmm.
direct. It's always received as being abrasive or mean or a bitch because I just say it.
Straight to the point, no sugarcoating.
Mm-mm.
Because so few people communicate in that way, when someone hears it from someone, it sounds abrasive and it sounds like an attack to some people because we don't hear it enough. I hear it a little bit in the military, but not even really to the extent that you dish it out. Because even when you would speak to me that way, I'd be like, damn,
So
who she
I'm
thinks she
gonna
is?
so I'm gonna quote what he said next. He said, "The more you grind down your true expression, the less you are communicating your authentic and genuine truth."
Yeah.
Well, if it's one thing that I have learned about myself, it is my authentic and genuine truth, and I could not be any more clear in communicating that. Mic drop. Black
Black Mike down.
mic.
I do feel like people always say to you though that they appreciate the way that you communicate with them, even if they got to get some tough love. Sometimes I feel like they let you know that your tough love was appreciated. Sometimes they say that.
What he says next is to give yourself permission to speak your truth. I literally, the day you deployed in 2021
Mm-hmm.
was the day that I gave myself that permission to just be myself and learn to enjoy my time with myself, learn how to think and have thoughts and not get lost in social media and scrolling. Like, I spent less time on social media then than I had my like in all the time that social media has been present
Mm-hmm.
and at our fingertips. I was more interested in spending the time learning my authentic truth and learning about things that I took joy in and spending time outside and hanging out with the dogs and coloring in coloring books and reading a ton of books that just helped me get over my shit. Like,
Well, if anyone's listened to some of the previous episodes, they know why you had to rediscover yourself because you had lost it along the way.
yeah, I did. And that was the best thing that I ever did. Like, I have accomplishments, I have things I'm proud of, but that is the one thing that I am most proud of doing for myself is just allowing that time for me to just be. And I'm actually really grateful that I even had that opportunity in the first place. One, like, just to recognize that you need to just find yourself, but like actually putting in the effort and the work and doing dumb mundane things just to see if you like them
Mm-hmm.
and then moving on to something else when you realize, yeah, that ain't for me.
Yeah.
And it's like doing that and like giving yourself that grace to just be a beginner and start small. Like, it literally changed everything. And I've never, ever in my whole life, I'll be 35 in May. Okay. We're recording this in the middle of February. In 34, almost 35 years, I've never been more at home in my own body or my mind. And with everything that has happened, with everything that is still happening, and like, I just feel so content. Yesterday was a very stressful day, just having to deal with all these things. And I got emotional during some of the process of that stuff. But I still stood my ground and spoke that authentic truth to be heard. And what's fascinating to me was we listened to this podcast that we're referencing today after at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like, when I kind of really think about the whole like meat and potatoes of that podcast, it makes me feel good to know that like I stand firmly in the things that are being taught to me, that they're really not even being taught to me, they're being reiterated
Right.
because I've already learned it on my own, and it's nice to have that like almost like oddly validated in a sense that
Yeah.
like I'm on the right track. Like I've set myself up for success.
Yeah.
So much so that one of the top high performance coaches in the world is literally saying things that validate my behaviors.
He laid down tools after you had already used them essentially, and you're like, oh, it's nice to be reinforced that I did the right thing in the moment and used my voice.
Yeah, and even kind of reflecting back on yesterday now and like having that thought come up, it makes me feel really good. So for you, like how can you take time for yourself? I know we all have a life and we all have things happening and obligations, but you have time. But like how much of that time is scrolling? I'm gonna call your ass out. Like Matt and I were calling each other out this morning about how much time we spend online just consuming things that aren't serving us in a positive way. And we love to excuse the behavior, but like for real, what is more important to you? Watching other people live a life that's manufactured, or you taking that time watching a manufactured version of somebody and actually doing something to get to know yourself, like spending 20 minutes outside in your backyard with your dogs or your kids
Mm-hmm.
with your phone in a completely different area than you are, and you're just there in your thoughts, in the elements, being a human being, taking it in, bro.
How are you going to learn who you are if you're always paying attention to who other people are? Now, there's something to be said for finding inspiration in other people, but at the same time, you got to spend some time on yourself, journaling or listening to music or working out and like focusing on your mental health and things like that through those processes. That's going to help you discover who you are. Because when you challenge yourself in writing or journaling, or you challenge yourself in the gym, it really does show you who you really are deep down inside. If you're a person that gives up, if you're a person that keeps going, and that's going to help you grow in the future, knowing that baseline of yourself.
I agree with that.
Thanks. I
You're such a dork.
know.
I love you. Yeah, I there was a video that was going around on TikTok at one point where a girl stood up in the middle of an auditorium full of people and interrupted somebody who was speaking. And I believe it was a political thing, but she stood up and she challenged what the person was saying because based off of previous things that they had said, it wasn't aligning with the words that they were now speaking. And
Mm.
she was a younger girl, and she stood up and her voice was shaking. She was borderline in tears out of fear, but she still said and spoke her truth and put it out there. And like, it is so hard to like exert yourself and like say what you really want to say. And like, I definitely was that person yesterday.
Mhm.
Even though I had tears rolling on my face, even though my voice was shaky, I knew that what I was saying was right. And I was unwilling to be quiet. And I made myself be heard. And I ended up having the last laugh because I was right. And I knew that what I was saying was facts. But it's so easy for people to dismiss you and treat you like you don't know,
Yep.
or treat you like they're in a position to shut you down when they're not. You're in charge of you. That's literally the only thing you're in charge of. And yeah,
Even if your knees are shaking and your voice is quivering, speak your mind. And especially if you know you're right, stand your ground.
yeah.
Make sure that you're heard.
He also mentioned like when you say you don't feel like you're being heard, like he asked, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that really mean to you? That like you don't feel accepted by the people around you,
Mm-hmm.
or what? Like, so think about that to yourself. Like, when you feel like you're not being heard, what does that really mean for you? Like, you don't feel celebrated, that the people
Hmm.
around you aren't buying into what you're putting down. Like, what does that really mean? Like, how does that make you feel internally? And acknowledge that, one, because I feel like in order to move through things, we first have to acknowledge the feelings that we're having, because a lot of people love to avoid their feelings. Um, but then he had stopped in the middle and said the majority of people listening to this podcast right now, like, they haven't even heard 90% of what he said. And he was like, I'll be lucky if 10% of the people
Yeah.
hear what I have to say. So maybe lower your expectations on what you expect other people to get from you, or like opposite that. Lower your expectations of what other people are taking from you. Did I
Yeah.
say that right?
Yeah, because that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Most people are self-absorbed. They're not really concerned with you in their life. They're mostly concerned about their day-to-day activities.
Yeah. And like the point that he had made, which I thought was hilarious because I was just actively doing that in that moment, was that like even now throughout this conversation, you've zoned out or thought about different parts of your life or your day
Mhm.
just in the 20 minutes that we've already been having this conversation, kind of reflecting back on this personal development we did yesterday.
And that's okay because the only thing that we care about is that you're here spending time with us and hopefully you take something away from this.
That part. And then the last thing he said was clear, direct, and consistent communication. And that's kind of where I was touching back earlier about I am so clear and so direct that sometimes it's not received well because people just aren't used to that
Hmm.
type of communication where it's like, I'm not going to talk about you, I'm going to talk to you. And it's funny because, like, when I'm in here filming stuff, I'm looking at you in the camera. Like, I'm envisioning what you look like. I'm making the most, I've always been told that I have the most intense eye contact because when I talk to you, I talk to you, like to you. And I don't know why people find that intimidating, but like,
Yeah.
I don't want you to think that like my eyes are wandering because I can't pay attention. Like, I want you to know I'm fucking deadlocked.
I was always told to look at somebody's nose when you're talking at them. So if you feel like I'm looking at your nostrils or something, I probably am looking up your nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm literally gazing into your soul behind your pupils. Behind your pupil. I'm literally gazing into your soul behind your pupils. I'm not looking at your nose or your hairline or your ears or whatever the hell he just said. I'm not going to placate it. I'm just going to say it. And when you learn how to say what you want to say, that is like such a freeing thing
Mhm.
because you realize that there are no consequences really when you speak your truth, because other people will have emotions, other people have opinions, they have judgments. They're going to have those things whether you say it or not.
So what are you gonna do?
Me,
Yeah.
I'm going to say what I need to say. And if there are things that come up from that, we can address it. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, like, I have to be myself. I'm working actively every single day to grow and be better. I'm not going to be the person that says, well, I am who I am. So,
Yeah.
you're just stuck with this. No, my intention is never to hurt or to harm people, but I'm sure as hell going to say what I need to say and
Yeah.
be myself. And you can love me or you cannot. That's totally your decision, but I'm going to keep on keeping on.
And I've been wrong in the past. And so if I say something and it's inaccurate and someone proves me wrong with facts, I'm okay with that. I put my information out there. We've had some sort of dialogue and it's something else has come of it. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, all the interactions that we have with people should be discussions and us trying to get it to know each other better and us trying to be on the same level with a dialogue. Like that's what relationships should be like, is like a dialogue. And you can't have genuine connections with people unless you're direct, you speak your mind.
Hey, you said something and I didn't like that. And I need you to know that I didn't like that. And,
Hmm.
it's okay that if this upsets you, me saying that you upset me, but I need you to know that how that happened, I didn't like it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Life goes on. Sorry
Yeah.
I made you feel that way. Life goes on.
People love to avoid confrontation too.
Mhm.
And it's like, just because you disagree with somebody doesn't make it a confrontation. I disagree with Matt almost daily.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that we fight every day.
No, and look, we're still together,
BFFs.
BFFs. Good to go.
Rock and roll.
Yeah. But we've been around each other enough to know each other's mannerisms and things like that. And if we got to know our friends and our relatives closer on that level, then maybe we could be that way with them too and agree to disagree on things
Now,
and move
one
on.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will say too is like we've also been reading a different book about emotionally immature people slash parents, and that's something that I actually learned today was there are emotionally unintelligent people out there that cannot take accountability for themselves. But that doesn't mean it's your responsibility to please them into a position where you feel accepted, heard, whatever. Like
Mm.
you have to just be yourself
And speak your mind.
and speak your truth. I had a lot to take away from that. And I think the biggest point to send you off with is that you have to find a way to make yourself heard as your true self, as your authentic self, because you're cool and you're worth being that person. And every time you say something where you're not actually saying what you want to say, you're kind of losing little parts of yourself along the way when you do that. And I personally know that like you grow a little bit more detached from yourself, and the more you do that, the longer and the harder it is to get back to finding who you are and getting back to that place of centeredness of yourself.
It's almost like you're chipping away at yourself a little bit every time you try to appease other people. And I hate that. I don't
Yeah,
want to do that anymore.
people don't. 10 out of 10 do not recommend. It's been nice catching back up with you. We'll be back on our normal schedule now going forward. But don't forget, like, follow, come join the conversation. I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether or not you feel heard. And yeah, make sure you follow on socials at Nicki.bunting. Come join me over on the website, nickibunting.com. We're on the road to 500 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that maddening?
It's awesome.
There's over 300 of you that like to know what we have to say.
Yeah.
Love you for it.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's always a freaking really good time with y'all. So, catch you next week.
See ya.